Hey, everybody, welcome. It's so great to have all of you tune us in and turn us on. Great lineup for you today. 2 hours, 2 hours. Um, First, let me say hi to Benny. Hello, Mr.
Howdy.
B.
You.
And then we got Olivia, you know, kind of producing the Facebook Live version of this because we are on Facebook Live, but we're also on KKNW AM 1150. We're also on Transformation Talk Radio and, okay, like a bunch of other places, which I don't even remember at this point. But what I want to say is for me, um, I am so inspired by people whose entire calling is to inspire others. And today's show is about that and so much more. And what I mean is probably going to have to take out these earrings, Benny. Are they jingling in my microphone?
I don't hear them too bad. I took
All
mine
right.
out, so at least we're doing the same thing here.
All right, good.
Yes. For those that are listening, yes, I
Yeah,
have ears. Yes, I
yeah.
have.
I took out my nose ring for today, but that's a that's a
Haven't
different
gone there
show.
yet.
I know that's a different show. But this is what I want to say. Yeah, I was kind of joking with Reverend Rebekah Simon-Peter before the show, my very special guest today joining me, because we're going to talk about not just her latest book, Dream Like Jesus, deepen your faith and bring the impossible to life. We're not just going to talk about that because I think the book is a representation of a life of bringing people to the place of possibility, understanding what the underpinnings are of spiritual enlightenment, understanding what the messages are of Jesus, Christianity, and beyond here in the United States. And what seems to be happening? What seems to be happening? Now, I will tell you for me, uh, I did refer to her as Reverend, but throughout may refer to her as Rebekah, whatever she likes. But the thing I want to say is that when we say yes to exploring a spiritual journey, and I say that because it really was a conscious decision on my part, because my early years, spirituality and religion were not good. So if you're me and you are 5 years old and 6 years old, and my mother commits suicide when I'm 6, and I'm in Catholic boarding school at a very, very young age, and they made an exception for me because my mom was suffering. And I later found out from alcohol and so forth and so on. But when you experience that at a young age, and it's not the level of spirituality and Christianity we're going to be talking about today, but when you experience that, what would help me change my perspective after being beat every night in a Catholic boarding school? Well, what I want to say to you is my stepmom, my Southern Baptist stepmom, my Southern Baptist stepmom that I got to go down the South with and participate in a level of spirituality that I had never seen before. Now, imagine my mom being born in a little teeny town in Victoria, Virginia. You can like Google that. And when I think about my grandparents, what outhouses, potbelly stove, this is real story. This is for real, folks. I talk about them in my book I'm writing. But when I think about that, this kid from the Bronx, the streets, the projects, now in the backwoods of Virginia, and my first Sunday service in the church that I had never experienced it before, laughing, dancing, hooting, hollering, scriptures, things that I had never experienced before. I must say, it healed a lot of wounds. So today, I want to fast forward to where we are with our spiritual journey through the eyes of my very special guest today. Because when people ask me, why is it that I dream the impossible? Why is it our entire team here at Transformation Talk Radio are not shackled by things in technology and people telling us that we cannot launch a network that will reach 100 networks, that will be 10 channels in about 3 months. Why is it we don't even think like that? I don't have the answers, but my guest does. Reverend Rebekah, great to have you here today.
Dr. Pat, you're my kind of people. Thanks for sharing your story. It was really inspiring.
I am the last person on the planet, and I will say this, and then you can help us understand it. But I am the last person on the planet that ever thought that I could strengthen my relationship with God, that I can strengthen my relationship with Jesus, that I could do it in my way. And I will tell you that part of that for me was getting in a recovery program in 1990.
Yep.
And so this is not a show about my addiction and not this show. I'm actually going to do another show on that.
Oh, that's good. I got in a recovery program in 1990. So there it is.
So do we both have anniversaries?
We probably do. Yes. Yeah.
So just a sidebar, and then we'll talk about this.
Yeah.
I got to understand a whole new way of understanding God from that program.
Absolutely.
Because nobody ever told me that I could have the God of my understanding. How about you?
Yeah,
how about
absolutely.
you?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. All right. Let's go. Let's go.
And what I love, talking about like you could develop your own understanding of God and how could healing happen and stuff. The thing I love is this understanding that life is not a fixed reality. When I got into a recovery program, I was like, it's always going to be this way. I'm always going to eat too much sugar, and I'm always going to drink too much of this, and I'm always going to smoke too much of that. And it doesn't have to be that way. And that becomes this little model for the whole rest of life. I don't always have to be pessimistic. I don't always have to be angry. I don't always have to be suspicious. I don't have to be a victim. What? That's the foundation for me in my whole spiritual journey, is that understanding life is not a fixed reality. We co-create our realities. And that's, bringing that into the Christian world. Well, there's an interesting topic.
And, let me just ask you about this for a minute, because first of all, I want to make sure that we're going to tell you a lot about today, but you have been given awards. And I want to talk about this. You've been given awards for a number of things, but one of them is for a coaching program, right?
Yeah.
And I want to talk with you about that, because when people are recognized for things like a coaching program, there's something underneath it that we should be talking about. And what I love is the word renewal. Yeah. I actually was going to launch an entirely different kind of treatment center, and it was called Life Renewal. Couldn't get the funding back then, but tell me about the word renewal and about what this means to create this culture of renewal.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. It's such a pleasure to be here. So I work with church leaders, and what I've noticed is that mostly in churches, and I pastored churches for over a decade, that mostly what's happening in churches is not a culture of renewal, but a culture of reluctance, which is so interesting because you think about it. Jesus says, look, whatever you ask for in my name, you'll have it. Express the deepest wishes of your heart. Just, if you have faith, just even a tiny little bit of faith, you can make all kinds of things happen. And yet what we see in the church is a culture of reluctance. Well, I'm not really a leader. Well, we shouldn't try that. Well, what if we don't have enough money? Well, there's all this sort of what ifs. And because I came into Christianity from a Jewish background, I was born and raised Jewish mom.
Read that.
Dad, yeah. And then became an Orthodox Jew because I had this big God experience, and then had this Jesus experience, which moved me into the path of discipleship. I forget where I was going with that sentence, but I have to tell you this. When
I could finish that sentence for you.
Finish it.
Well, where you went to was the same place I went to, because I can't say I went down the path of being an Orthodox Jew, but I know what it's like to experience Passover and a number of other things, because I became a spiritual hitchhiker.
Oh,
right. And what I mean by that is, okay, give me a ride to this place. Oh, wait a minute. Give me a ride to that place.
Yeah.
But what I think in my opinion, what I think you were saying is you can choose to be on the fence. We can choose to be on the fence.
Yeah, it hurts.
Reluctance is a fence sitter.
It is. Well, I remember what I was going to say. So here I come out of this background, and I have this Jesus experience. A very Jewish Jesus shows up in a vision, a waking vision, thick, curly, dark beard, curly, brown hair, crinkle around the eyes, just a warm face, and spoke to me. He came out of nowhere. I wasn't expecting him. I wasn't looking for him. I didn't feel lost, nothing like that. And yet he spoke to me about this love and this acceptance. I love you. I accept you. I understand you. So here I have this, I have this miracle happen to me, which I didn't know was unusual because I wasn't in the Christian world. And I get to the church through, a long journey, which I just talk about in the book. I wind up in the church. I go to seminary. I get this call to ministry, and I wind up in the church as a minister. And I think there will be miracles. Of course, there will be miracles, because look what happened to me. Jesus came at a burning bush experience, right? And I get to church, and what I find is fabulous people, warmth, commitment, dedication, love, and reluctance. I start to read the Bible, and I'm reading about loaves and fishes. I start to read the New Testament. I knew the Old Testament. Loaves and fishes, people rising from the dead, a little bit of spittle, and all of a sudden, somebody can hear. And in the church, it's like, well, I don't know. I don't think we have enough money. And I think, oh, this is what Jesus was talking about. If you just had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to this mountain, move from here to there. Or you could say to this budget constraint, hey, we're not going to pay attention to you. And miracles would happen. So in the program I lead and have developed, Creating a Culture of Renewal, it's an award-winning program. We start with the expectation of renewal, not reluctance. We start with the expectation of there will be miracles. We're here to co-create miracles. And it's not so much about trying harder or doing more or working 80 hours a week. It's not about that at all. It's about something I think you'll really appreciate, Dr. Pat.
Yeah.
Shift in mindset.
Totally.
Shift in mindset.
Totally.
And so I teach people how to move from the whole idea of being a disciple to an apostle. In other words, from moving from believing in Jesus to believing like Jesus.
I tell you what, I was on a panel once, a spiritual panel, right? Because, one of the things I do is called street smart spirituality. That's what I'm known for. What do they say in marketing? That's, other than Dr. Pat, that's my brand, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I was on a panel once, and I remember this, and I would like you to comment on this. And I was asked by a minister. It was a minister that was, it was a bunch of us up there. I didn't get asked very many questions because I don't refer to myself as Reverend anything, right? I don't do that. And so I didn't get any questions until about 20 minutes in. And I'm just sitting there because I found it, wow, I'm learning a lot. And the question I got was, Dr. Pat, got a question for you. Do you think the glass is half full or half empty? I said, it's neither. It's overflowing. I don't even know why we asked that stupid question. I mean, and that was my answer. And you could hear a pin drop, right? And I said, where have we anywhere in any spirit that I know of, maybe you could help me. I'm not really trained, but my answer was, if you can point to me where any spiritual deity, including the 98 million deities in the Hindu religion, if you could point to me where there is a reference to a half of something.
Yeah.
I mean, you're out in the desert, you got one fish and you got a loaf of bread, and then you have a gazillion.
Right.
It wasn't a half a fish. And I went on about this for 20 minutes.
Wow.
But isn't this a philosophy where we think we're halved?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're so right. Because the whole idea of God is abundance,
right?
Infinity, unlimitedness. And yet we then go back to this culture of reluctance. Well, maybe it's half full, maybe it's half empty, instead of this overflowing abundance. And that's really what I want people to tap into when I'm teaching them how to believe like Jesus, or talking with people about that, is to believe like he believed. He believed he was one with God. He believed in that inner indivisibility. And my passion and purpose in life is to connect people with their inner divinity. That's what I'm really about. Is that
I love it.
divinity? Yeah.
And I got to tell you, in your book, so just so you know, I read the book, so I know they give me a lot of questions in advance to ask you, and I am going to ask you a couple of them. But one of the things that I can't help take away from the book is this thread, this one thread throughout here, that the word, now I'm paraphrasing, that the word impossible is not a spiritual construct. And that's the thing that I want to talk to you about, because dream like Jesus is not dreaming about compromise or mediocre outcomes.
That's right.
It's quite different. In your words, can you talk to that the way you have in the book?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, dreaming like Jesus. So I think that Jesus was driven by a dream. This idea of the king, he called it the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God. He wasn't talking about what happens after you die. He was talking about what's possible while you're alive.
That's right.
And the way I envision it, in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So that everything we think about heaven, all the beauty, the love, the light, the humor, the joy, the forgiveness, the acceptance, the equity, the justice, the inclusion, all of that's not just for some time later or some other place, but that's for us to live and experience right now. And that somehow we live in such a way that people experience that around us, with us, through us. Again, it's not about working harder 80 hours a week and going to change the whole world. It's about having a shift in consciousness and living from that space such that the way we live reflects that.
Yeah. I want to talk with you about that in depth as well, because one of the things I was first of all, what I really love about the book is not just talking with us about things, but really inviting us to imagine things.
Yes.
And taking us through what I call beautiful experiential sheets to really pinpoint where we are in our journey.
Yeah.
And then how to invoke others in the idea. So 16 years ago is when I started this dialing a wrong phone number, right? And I dialed into an internet station. My listeners have heard me tell this story.
Huh.
And anytime I was asked about it, I never really talked about why I did that and why I paid thousands of dollars in 2003 for a show on the internet. And when I talk about it now, I basically say, look, I heard a voice that literally gave me a sense of knowing to just do it. I couldn't have predicted 3 months later, 5 days a week out of sea. I couldn't have predicted where I am today.
Yeah.
So how do we help people, especially the way you talk about it? How do we help folks even today in what's going on in the world? How do we help them dream like Jesus?
Yeah. I think the first thing, and such a great story, Dr. Pat, but the first thing is to pay attention to that inner prompting that's already there. Probably wasn't a mistake, probably wasn't a wrong number that you called. Pay attention to that still small voice, that feeling in the gut, that flash of an idea. I've learned as I pray upon awakening on a daily basis, to ask God's guidance and for that spiritual inspiration, that what I think are stray thoughts are not stray thoughts. They're promptings from the Spirit. And when I pay attention to those promptings, I know then that I'm on a path, and I begin to trust what I'm hearing and trust the calling that's in my life. And you're right, that's the first step to dreaming like Jesus, because I believe it's within. It's not so much, I got to figure out something important to do out there or make myself, worth living. No, the answers are deep in our souls already. And it's just about opening up in whatever way you do to that.
One of the most challenging questions I get about, sometimes sharing what my spiritual beliefs are. And when I went down to that music video, I got asked a lot of questions. The one question I get asked about what I believe and how I believe it, it doesn't come from verses in the Bible. It does come from my mom. So my stepmom. So I want to ask you about this because here's this woman, right? And anybody knows anything about folks that come from the deep South. And back in the day, like my mom had my sister Joyce at 12 and my sister Doris at 13 years old.
Yeah.
Back in the day, right?
Yep.
But here's what I learned before I learned any of what you and I are going to talk about here today. My mom talked about a spiritual practice and a belief that included every walking, living person on the planet. My mama marched in some of the marches down in the South for equal rights, right?
Yep.
So what I'm trying to say is before I got to understand what came out about spirituality, religion, and Jesus, about who not to include, the hardest thing for me to reconcile in my own life was this figure that loved everyone, according to my mom, that included everyone, that included every religion, that included every sexual preference, that included whether you're short, you're tall, you're smart, you're not smart, included everyone. And that was difficult for me because I came from a religion that was based on fear. And now I got my mother talking to us three girls about, you just got to love everybody.
Yeah. So either God is love or God is not. And it's that simple. If God is love, and if it turns out that God doesn't love the same people you don't love, maybe that's not really God, And it does. It opens the heart. It stretches the heart and the brain to really imagine, what does it really mean that God loves everyone? I don't love everybody. I'll tell you the truth. I don't. I can generate love for people. Maybe I should put it this way. I don't like everybody. Not everybody likes me. Okay. But to be a follower of the spiritual path of love is to be willing to have one's heart wrenched open and one's mind opened to see things in a new way. I'm married for the second time to a wonderful husband, Jerry Gonzalez. My first husband, turns out he was transgender. Now, not actively at the time, but it was an impulse within. And that opened my mind. That opened my heart. So now when people talk about issues of human sexuality, of gender, it's like, you know what? I knew and loved somebody that didn't ask for this. It's who they were. And the more life experiences we have and the more we share our stories, the more I think the sense of God opens up, like, oh, and this, and getting away from our doctrines. And that's the thing. When Jesus came to me in that vision, he didn't give me a scroll to sign. Okay, sign right here, and then I'll love you. It wasn't anything like that. It was, I get you, I understand you, I accept you, I love you. There was no strings attached. And so for me, that's how I came into the world of knowing Jesus and being a disciple and a follower of his. It's no strings attached. And so trying to put all these strictures in, but you can't love these people and you don't talk to those people. That's hard because there are people with whom I disagree on things. And it's not always easy to have conversations with folks like that. But I'm called to love those people too, right?
Yeah.
Like I want them to love me. And so I really do think it's a much bigger world and it's a much bigger God than most of us are really comfortable with.
But isn't what you and I are talking about, and this is what I love about this, and I want to talk about this when we come back, because it really talks to the core of your book and what you teach others. And that is dream like Jesus. What does that mean? When you think about that, and you think about what this man was able to accomplish in a
Yeah.
short period of time
Yeah.
in a very small geographical journey,
Yeah.
and we think about where we are today, the question then comes up is, why are people either moving away from philosophies of love,
Yeah.
or, as you point in the book, their decline only in certain areas? Why is it in some Christian areas the message is so powerful that people will go out of their way to buy satellite radio so as not to miss the chat? When we come back, we're going to take a journey about what this means to dream like Jesus. How did Jesus deal with conflict? How was it that Jesus always had a place to stay, always had food to eat? What was it about that? Was it a thought about scarcity or not enoughness? What was it about that that Reverend Rebekah Simon-Peter is bringing us today that we can all have? Let's take a short break. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So great to have all of you tune us in. If you want to find out more about me, you can go to the drpatshow.com, or you can go to transformationtalkradio.com. And this show, by the way, will air again later tonight. If you're watching on Facebook Live, I think Facebook, it just stays there. But you could also go over to our YouTube channel at Transformation Talk Radio over there, and you'll see a later version of it. Reverend Rebekah, would you mind, for folks, how do they get a copy of the book, first off?
Yeah.
And then also, how do they find out more about you?
Excellent. Thanks for asking. Yeah. So the book is Dream Like Jesus, Deepen Your Faith and Bring the Impossible to Life. And you can go to Amazon.com to find it there. And any other independent bookseller should be able to get it for you. And you can find out more about me at my website, RebekahSimonPeter.com. I'll spell that RebekahSimonPeter.com, or cultureofrenewal.com. Those are they'll lead you to the same place, to my website. And you can find out more about me there, the book, and all the other work that I'm doing. So
yeah, I want to thank you so much for this. There's so much in the book, but I want to ask you, I want to kind of get back to what we were talking about during the break.
Yeah.
Are mainstream congregations, are they in trouble? Where are they? Because I was sharing with you that one of the largest centers here in Seattle went from like 3,300, a great hall, to renting space maybe on a Sunday.
Wow.
I never quite understood that. And it seemed to happen so fast. But yet, I think I do understand it after reading your book. But is this happening all over?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah, let me tell you about it. This is the reason I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I had experienced miracles in my life. I had this Jesus experience. He came to me. I realized through my recovery work that life is not a fixed reality, that you co-create your reality. Jesus says it in the Bible over and over, but the church isn't practicing that generally. They're not dreaming like Jesus. And what I mean by that is that they're more focused on the institution itself and surviving than they are on actually carrying the message. And when I talk about dreaming like Jesus, I'm talking about a vision that's bigger than you are, that scares you, that absolutely needs God in order for it to be accomplished, that unifies and inspires people because it's something bigger than what you've currently undertaken, and that it's going to take you out of your comfort zone. So the churches that aren't doing that, those are the churches that are struggling. Those are the churches that have the symptoms of decline. And what's interesting is you can see, theologically from your spiritual center all the way to Joel Osteen. I mean, there's a huge theological spectrum out there. Some of those churches are doing well, and some of those churches are not. It's not really about the theology, I don't think. I think it's about the vision. It's about the dream. It's about envisioning something that actually draws people in, that your people, whoever they are, can get excited about. So to dream like Jesus is to have something much bigger. And, to bring in coronavirus for a second.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden now churches are doing things they were never able to do before.
No
They're shut out of
kidding.
their buildings. And so the coronavirus has done for us what we could not do for ourselves as church leaders. Now, all of a sudden, people aren't saying anymore, well, we can't do it. We've never done it that way before. When it comes to online worship or online giving, what they're saying is, hey, whatever it takes for us to stay connected, we're willing to do. Oh, huge shift right there. Number two, we're battling something we've never lived through before, a pandemic like this? No way. And we're rising to these new heights. People are pivoting in their faith and the way they deliver church in a way that never has happened before because we're taking on something bigger than we are. Now, we didn't choose this. This wasn't our Jesus-like dream, but all of a sudden it's about how do we pull people together? How do we thrive in sort of unfriendly, disconnected circumstances? So whether the church is meeting in a building or the church is meeting online, you've got to have a dream that's bigger than you are, that requires God, that inspires people, and in which the focus is not on the institution itself, our little survival, it's on the community, it's on the people. And that's one of the big changes we've seen now. One of the old messages in church was, well, we don't really know the community. We don't really know the people. We can't really connect. Now everybody gets, we are the community, in a positive and a negative way. Oh, my little droplets could be a problem, and my contribution could be the answer. So there's some neat things that are happening.
It's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine and I was so first of all, one of the things you just said has really been a cornerstone for me in my life. So most people, when they're in recovery, all anybody knows is about the 12 steps, right?
Yeah.
But my recovery in 1990, I worked with somebody out of New York, and he focused on what we call promises.
Yeah.
And it's become those 12 promises have become the cornerstone for my life and the way I live it. But the one you just mentioned is the promise that we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves.
Yes.
And my friend and I were talking about it the other day, and it's so funny that you're on today. And I just had, you call this, let me paraphrase. You refer to what the pinnacle of your message is from me is to get our spiritual mojo. I think that's what you call it, right?
Yes.
To get our spiritual mojo on.
Yep,
I couldn't agree with you more. My friend said to me, Pat, don't you remember the prayer of Jabez? I said, you mean Jabez? No, he says Jabez. And I said, okay, I do remember that prayer. And he said, do you remember the prayer itself has two parts? And I hadn't thought about it. And he says, remember that what the ask was. And this is totally related, I think, to what we're about to talk about. So do you remember what the ask was? I said, yeah. The ask was, give me more territory and get rid of my pain. I mean, now I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah, right.
And many people don't focus on the give me more territory. And I thought, is that like a weird request? Like, wouldn't you just say, get rid of my pain? No. And then we talked about this at length. And I went back to a series of books that Catherine Ponder put out. I have the entire series. And actually, that was one of the things that I looked at way back in 1990. And the series talks about the millionaires from this thousands of years ago.
Okay.
And they talked about when we see these people like Moses and they walk the earth, we forget that in today's day and age, people were millionaires. They had sheep, they had land. So this prayer didn't make sense to me today. But I think we forgot that part. I think we forgot the part of the ask. What do you think?
I think so. Jesus said over and over, ask and you shall receive.
No kidding.
Knock and the door will be opened unto you. And it's really about the ask. It really is about the ask. Because just like you started off with, cup half empty, half full, it's overflowing. There's so much. And the way I envision prayer is that the moment we ask, it's like there's a conveyor belt. And then the answer to prayer gets plopped on this conveyor belt. The conveyor belt, comes towards us, and it's going to come all the way. Your prayers are going to be answered unless you say, oh gosh, I don't know if I could really handle that much blessing. I'm not sure I could handle, the answer to that prayer. I don't know if I could handle a project that's bigger than I am. And the moment we express doubt, it's like it flips the switch on the conveyor belt. It's not that God doesn't want to bless us. It's not that the world isn't full of blessing for us. It's our own self-doubt that gets in the way. And we stop allowing all that abundance, and not just physical abundance, not just like material, but spiritual abundance, self-confidence, these dreams, that can change the world. And right now I'm in the middle of the 40 days of apostleship. I've got a series going on because it's Lent, right? It's we started Ash Wednesday, which was a really different world back in February 26th than the one we're living in. It goes to Easter. And this period of Lent is a preparation for Easter, for the rising again.
Yeah.
That many mainline kinds of denominations pay attention to the spiritual preparation. And so I'm writing about the 40 days of apostleship. And instead of giving up something, like give up meat, have fish or whatever, it's really about shifting our focus and shifting our consciousness so that we're not only believing in Jesus, we're believing like Jesus, because the world is ready for us to be unleashed. The world is ready. I mean, you're ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
Deep inside every human being, they're ready for something more. And the 40 days of apostleship is this opportunity to tap into that spiritual mojo. What did Jesus believe? How can I believe like that? That's what apostles did. They believed like Jesus so they could do the things he asked them to do. That's the world we live in now, Pat. People are ready.
People are ready. And, I want to talk to you. I want to take a short break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the ways that you in the book, some of the ways you share to help people make this shift.
Absolutely.
Because I think that it's one thing to really talk about things, but I remember for me, I was given very specific things to do to help me get from complete despair, suicidal tendency, to go from there, right? Being at rock bottom, never thinking anything at all would happen in my life. But it wasn't just about yes, right? Ask and you shall receive. It was, you must do some things to really help reframe the wiring that you might have in yourself. So when we come back, this is the work that you do, help people making that shift, both energetically, spiritually, and in the practical world, materially. When we come back, let's talk about this, because you have literally created a spiritual mojo formula. Let's take a break, everybody. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody, welcome back. So glad to have Reverend Rebekah joining me here today. The book is Dream Like Jesus. There's a lot in this book, but what I'm really struck by, Rebekah, is the fact that it's not just a book that's beautifully written with great stories, but it's also a how-to.
Yeah.
And I think so often when we talk about these ideas and we talk about how Jesus lived and dreamed, and we talk about people that walked the earth thousands of years ago, we forget the practicality part. Like, by the way, Jesus had to eat and sleep.
Yeah.
So this, though, also talks about how you go from shifting mindset to shifting materially. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. Jesus was a very practical guy, very spiritual and very practical. So what I lay out in the book is a time-tested process that we use in our Creating a Culture of Renewal groups with church leaders across the country. And it's the model is DARE, D-A-R-E. The first step is to dream. You got to have that dream, something that's bigger than you are, that expands assumptions about what's possible, that scares you, that requires God. It's not about you, it's about the community, and that inspires and unifies people. You got to have this dream. It's got to be worth living for. It's got to be worth getting up for. And it's got to be worth giving your all to. The second piece of dare is to align people to the dream. You cannot carry out a dream like this on your own. And Jesus didn't. This is the single biggest mistake churches and church leaders make. They think, oh, our pastor is sort of the equivalent of Jesus. They're going to do it all. No, they're not. If they're actually going to be the equivalent of Jesus, they're going to delegate and empower and authorize you to use your agency to be a part of something bigger than you are. So the first step is dreaming. The second step is part of that is sharing that dream so widely that you align people to your dream, that other people get so excited by it, they buy in. And you'll know that people are excited by your dream when they start repeating it back to you and they're telling you, oh, hey, I got this idea, or you know what we should do. That's when you know other people have bought in. Now, we look at Jesus's life. He shared the dream. He went around preaching the kingdom, and then he called people to him. He called apostles to him that he then taught, and then he sent them back out to realize the dream. That's the third step. Dream, align, realize. When you've got the dream, you've got people on board with you, then you can actually together go realize the dream, bring it to fruition, bring it to pass, let it happen. Jesus did that through his people. He wasn't the only one doing his deal. And then the fourth part, that E in dare, is to expand. Once you've shared your dream, once you've aligned people to the dream, you're not in it by yourself. You've got a team of people, you've got a network, you've got a community, and you're actually out there bringing this dream to pass. What happens after that, it's like this stone in the water, and the ripple effects, you have no idea where they're going to go. But if you have the courage to just try what you're being prompted to do, you're going to find out that the most amazing things begin to happen. And that's the expansion part. People's faith grow, new ideas come about, you grow in ways you hadn't even anticipated, and the person you wind up as is very different than the person you started off as. And your whole team evolves with you as you go. Yeah.
And I think what you're bringing forward, and I want to get back to this, but I want to make sure before we do, how do people find out about this program? Could you give your website again?
Absolutely. Thank you. The program is called Creating a Culture of Renewal. It's a 3-year in-depth immersion for church leaders, laity, or clergy that teaches them how to expand their emotional intelligence, how to have leadership smarts, how to shift a culture, how to grow in apostleship, not just discipleship. And you can find out about it on my website, go to cultureofrenewal.com, cultureofrenewal.com, or my name, RebekahSimonPeter.com, RebekahSimonPeter. And I spell that for everybody. So
I love it.
Peter.com. Yeah.
Well, okay. So here's the thing I want to bring in towards the end of this. You know, for a lot of years, and this, of course, you and I both know this quote, right? But I can't tell you, for decades, I misquoted this quote until I saw it in a television series on a church. I must admit, it was The Walking Dead. And it was up on I'm serious. It was like there was a scene from this in a chapel, and this quote was on there. And I looked at it and I said, man, they got that wrong.
Ooh.
And then I looked it up. So here's what it is. For years, I said, faith without works is death. DEATH, death, for years. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. But it's still the same. And this is what I want to talk about now, because I think this quote, I can't remember if it was, I don't know, maybe it was James, whoever it was. Mm-hmm. Faith without works is dead. Now that is a quote that you and I both know from the program, right? Mm-hmm. That is a quote that is so important. Yeah. And it speaks to what you're talking about. But it doesn't really get to the next part, the later on, that things that come after that verse, which is what you talk about. So if you take faith and you take works, and you take love and you take possibility, and you put them all together, that's the way you've done it in the book. Yeah. You're saying faith, great.
Yep.
Works, great.
Yeah. Put them together.
Got to put them together.
That's where the miracles happen.
Totally.
That's where the miracles happen. Because it takes something, you have this idea, you have this belief, you have this prompting to actually step out in faith and to put it into practice. Now you've entered into the realm where the miraculous can happen, because now you're meeting God. And I talk about this in the book. I talk about how co-creating miracles with God is like being in a dance. Years ago, I loved to dance. I did a ballroom dance series of classes, and I never really knew how the waltz and all that worked. I mean, I could see the steps, but what I discovered is that the lead and the follow, the man and the woman, as it were, press hands together. The woman has to meet that man's hand with equal force. He's not trying to overpower her, and she doesn't overpower him, but they have to be like this, because that's how he steers. And the more firm her hand is, the more she can be led through these I was led through these incredible, intricate steps. And that's how it is with us and God. If we show up ready, willing, able, believing in ourselves, not just believing in God, but believing in ourselves, then God can work with us.
Oh my God. You and I could do a whole show on how you learn trust and faith in dancing, because there's another part of it that I didn't get. I always got that part, right?
Okay, yeah.
The part I didn't get, which my friends are like, dude, we can't teach you how to do this dance because you just don't do it. And that is when the arm goes around your back.
Yeah.
You're supposed to lean back.
Lean into it. Yes.
You're supposed to lean back.
Yes. Contact, pressure.
That's called trust.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Thank you so much for today. One last question. I'd love to know what your personal message is. And thank you so much for taking this message out. What would you like to leave us with today?
What I'd like to leave you with is you are capable of so much more than you think you are, because you're not just a human being having a spiritual experience. You're a spiritual being having a human experience. You are made of humanity and divinity together. Don't leave out one or the other. Put them together and watch miracles happen, you and God and the world together.
Oh, I love it. And what Reverend Rebekah says is you got to get your spiritual mojo on.
Get your spiritual mojo. Yeah.
All absolutely. Right. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure to be with you.
Well, hey, everybody. I love this book. And I just want to say I didn't get to everything in it. So you're going to have to go get the book and read it. Let's take a short break, Benny. Olivia, we'll be right back.